it's definitely the best knob that I've touched in 46 years. It's so good. Wait for the conclusion, Joe. Wait for the conclusion. Just be patient. Don't ruin it this early. Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on Porsche's 911 992.2 generation Carrera T. In October 2025, a Carrera T will set you back £115,400 before options. That's roughly 12 grand more than a Carrera and roughly 5 grand less than a Carrera S. So it kind of sits between those two models, at least in terms of pricing. Talking of the Carrera S, I will be getting my hands on one of those very soon, so make sure you keep an eye out for it on the channel. Thankfully, this does come with a decent amount of standard equipment, including Porsche's PASM. It has an LSD on the rear axle. In fact, it has rear axle steering as well. It has lightweight glass, which is about 4 kilos lighter than a regular Carrera. It also comes standard with these Carrera S wheels. They're staggered, so we have 20-inch on the front axle, 21-inch on the rear axle. I must admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the way they look, and if I was speccing a Carrera T, I would definitely option the beautiful RS Spider wheels, which are about 1,500 quid. But the main standard feature you get on the new Carrera T is the 6-speed manual gearbox. You see, you can't get a manual box in a base Carrera, Carrera S or Carrera GTS. In fact, you have to go all the way up to a GT3, and that's a lot more money, and also you're not necessarily going to get an allocation for a GT3, whereas you can walk into any Porsche showroom and pick one of these up. So it'll be interesting to see how this fares as a road car, and if it really is a viable option as a cut price GT3 Touring. This press car has £15,000 worth of options on it, which, dare I say it, is kind of normal for a 911. And most of those consist of the £4,600 carbon bucket seats. They're not the folding ones that we now get in the GT3 and GT3 Touring. They're the regular ones, but they're still absolutely brilliant in terms of support, and I find them very comfortable on short and longer journeys. We then have this £1,700 Cartagena yellow metallic paintwork, which I'm not sure if I love or I hate. It certainly works on this press car, but I don't think I would have my Carrera T in that colour. It also clashes quite badly with my jumper. When we get around the front, we've got some fancy £2,000 HD matrix headlamps, and the last option that's worth talking about is the £1,300 upgraded Bose sound system. A small detail that I really like on the new Carrera T are these little simple stickers. They've got Porsche at the top, and then they've got a diagram of the gated 6-speed manual. And when we get around the back of the car, because this is a 911, that is where the engine sits. There's not much to see here apart from a couple of cooling fans, but beneath them you'll find a 3-litre twin-turbo flat 6. It's essentially the same unit that's in the base Carrera. 394 horsepower, 450 newton meters of torque. It doesn't seem like much for a car that starts at just over £115,000. But I've always said that the most power you really need for a road car is 400 horsepower. So when you make that up to the 6-speed manual, well, that might be the perfect combination and the perfect ingredients. Porsche claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.5 seconds and go on to a top speed of 183 miles an hour. Jumping inside, and you won't be surprised to hear that I absolutely love it. In fact, I love the majority of 911 interiors, especially the 992 generation, but this being the latest 992.2, they have removed a couple of nice features, including the tab that used to replicate a key. That has now been replaced with a fairly ordinary looking button. But the most important thing is when you press that button and you turn this drive mode around to Sports Plus, you depress the clutch and you fire it up, well, that still sounds like a flat 6 and a 911 to me, and that's really important because I think cars like the very latest 911 GTS, that just doesn't sound very authentic when you fire it up, whereas this is still quite old school. We have a Cartagena yellow trim that's on the door cards, dashboard, it's down here in the center console. Initially I didn't like it, but actually now I do like it, and it lifts this otherwise dark and German interior. I think it adds a bit of character. So I'm not sure if that's a standard feature on the T, but it does look good in here, and I think the interior is a better place with it. All of this is very standard fare. We now have a full digital display in front, so there's no more analog dial. Again, something they removed with the latest 0.2 generation. And although I would love the analog dial back in this car, the graphics that they've used and how configurable that cockpit and dashboard is, it does give you some features that you didn't have before. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence with that, but it definitely feels like a premium interior overall. Plenty of leather, lovely stitching where you want there to be stitching. Do you need these £4,600 optional carbon buckets? Well, if you can afford them, yes. If you're gonna track your Carrera T, then probably yes. If you're gonna use it as a daily on the road, then the standard sports seats are pretty good, and you're gonna save a chunk of money. Driving position is incredible. It's so adjustable. It fits all shapes and sizes. I'm sitting lovely and low, and everything is exactly where I want it. A small subtle detail that's worth talking about over here on the passenger side of the dashboard is a 6-speed manual diagram similar to the stickers that are in the rear window. Not that you need that, because, well, you can't avoid this beautiful piece of art. It's definitely the nicest gear stick I've ever held and ever looked at. It's stunning. It's nicer than the one that's in the 911 ST. We all know that car cost upwards of £300,000. And it really harps back to the Carrera GT, in my opinion, with the wooden details. It's just lovely. It's shorter than the old 7-speed manual box, so it has a shorter throw. It just dominates this otherwise brilliant cabin. It's so nice. It makes me smile every time I look at it. It's definitely the best knob that I've touched in 46 years. You might have noticed that conditions outside have changed since we did the intro, and that's because I tend to do lots of my reviews, especially this time of year, over 2 days, and unfortunately the predicted sunshine hasn't turned up today. But that's not a bad thing, because we're reviewing a driver's car, and in slippery conditions that sometimes brings out everything that we need to know about the car. It's no secret that I have always championed the base 911 Carrera. In fact, I think over the recent generations, 997, 991 and 992.1 or 0.2, the base car is actually the best sports car and 911 that Porsche make, especially when you're talking about a road car. Of course, when you take that car out on track, a GT3 or a GT3 RS, as I recently experienced, would absolutely smoke it. And those cars are designed to be pushed very hard and to come alive on track. So when you take that base car and you add a brilliant 6-speed manual gearbox, a limited slip diff, and some other standard driver focus options, well, you don't have to be a betting man or woman to predict that this is probably going to take top step. Before we discuss the brilliance of this car, let's just talk about that price. At just over £115,000 base, it's really expensive. But as you know, car pricing has gone absolutely nuts in the past 4 or 5 years, especially with premium stuff like 911s. When you break that down into bang for buck, or more accurately, pound per horsepower, Well, this works out at 293 pounds per horse. Comparing that to something like BMW's M2 that now has 480 horsepower for about 68,000 pounds, well, that car works out at 143 pounds per horse, meaning it's less than half the money to get the same amount of power. But thankfully, this Carrera T is not about power or straight line pace, although it never really feels like it's lacking in straight line pace. Definitely not. And if we break it down another way and compare it to Porsche's brand new 992.2 generation GT3 Touring, well, that car retails at about 160,000 pounds base. And that's if you purchased 20 Taycans in the past 18 months. Otherwise, you're not getting your name down on one, and you have to buy a used one, slightly used, something with delivery miles on, a flipped car, essentially. Well, they're going for about 240 or 250,000 pounds at the moment. So when you compare 911 to 911 with a 6-speed manual, well, it actually looks like it's pretty good value. But I'll leave you guys to discuss that in the comments below. Let's discuss this manual 6-speed box. In recent years, if you wanted a manual box in your 911 and it wasn't a GT3 or an ST, Porsche would sell you a 7-speed manual box. They first introduced that in the 991 about 12 or 13 years ago. I must admit, when I first tried it, I didn't love it. It was a good box, but not a brilliant box, especially by Porsche's standards. And over the years, that 7-speed box did get better, until very recently. In fact, this car's predecessor, the 992.1 Carrera T and the 992.1 GTS that I tried a couple of years ago, I quite liked that 7-speed manual. It wasn't bad at all. Just took a bit of time getting used to because, well, yeah, there was an extra cog that you just had to program your brain into remembering to use all of the time. But this is on a completely different level. It's perfection. We've already talked about how good it looks and how lovely it feels. But the action, the weighting of it, you can be so precise, even I can be precise with it. It's so lovely. It is on a completely different planet to anything that BMW will offer you, and in fact it's on a completely different level to the old 7-speed manual we've just been talking about. It is so good, and that's before we discuss the ratios. You see, Porsche have a habit of giving us very long gearing with their manual gearboxes. You think about the 981 GT4 or the more recent 718 GT4 in manual. Second gear in those cars were good for 85, 86 miles an hour. Way too long. When you factor in that they had a lovely 4-litre NA motor, most of the power and torque was right at the top. If you wanted to push on in those cars, well, you're only ever really using first, second, and sometimes third gear if you're out of the UK. Whereas this one, well, thankfully, they have shortened the ratios. Second gear is about 12% shorter by my reckoning, meaning it will still do 75 miles an hour, apparently, in second gear, but it's noticeably shorter. And when you factor in that this has a twin turbo motor with subtle turbos, they're not overly obvious. You're not getting massive amounts of boost. It's just kind of like torque filling everywhere. So if you do find yourself caught out, like I am now, fourth gear at 45 miles an hour at 2,000 RPM, if you put your foot down, it gives you a lovely amount of torque, and then the power starts kicking in. But the important thing is, if you want to push hard and you want to use all the revs, well, it encourages you to rev out all the way to the 7,500 RPM red line. So it really does give you The best of both worlds. Another bonus with this gearbox is when you put it into sixth, well, that seems to have now become an override gear or cruising gear. So when you're sitting at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, it's now doing 2,200 RPM, whereas the 6-speed in a GT4, sixth gear at 70 miles an hour, it would be doing closer to 3,000 RPM. I remember the recent Boxster 4-litre GTS manual that Lou and I took to the Alps about a year ago. One of the negatives with that car is when you're sitting on a French toll route at 85 miles an hour, it was doing almost 4,000 RPM, and that became quite tiring quite quickly. It also chewed through a lot of fuel because it was revving so high, whereas this, it's really efficient and really relaxing, meaning you can cruise down to your favorite roads in the Alps with relative efficiency and a chilled cabin. When you get down there, where you've got the other 5 cogs that are set up almost perfectly. One small complaint relating to the gearbox is the clutch pedal and how far over to the left it seems to be. And I reckon that's more of a packaging issue for right-hand drive cars. You see a lot of European spec sports cars that have manual boxes, especially, everything seems to be slightly offset. And the problem in this car is the lack of space between the clutch pedal and the footrest to the left of the clutch pedal. And in fact, since doing my intro in my Air Jordans, I've switched over to my narrower Pelosi driving shoes just so I can fit my left foot down on the footrest. I'm sure that's not going to be an issue for the majority of people because I have big feet, but it's definitely something that I had to talk about because otherwise I'd just be praising this box and these pedals and the clutch weight, etc. all day long, because aside from that tiny issue, it's just perfect, absolutely perfect. It's an absolute pleasure to use. It's a pleasure to drive with. And I know Porsche's PDK gearbox is so good. It was brilliant when they launched it, and it's miles better today. But I can't see any reasons you would spec your 911 without the manual box and therefore not going for the Carrera T, because it's the only one this side of a GT3 that you can get a manual box with. Let's now talk about the handling. I knew it was going to be good because once again, the base Carrera is brilliantly set up for the public road, and this is no different. But they have engineered in a few extra bits that make the car feel a little bit more alive and precise. That rear axle steering, although I'm not the biggest fan of rear axle steering on sports cars or on the 911, I usually ask people to opt out of it. Don't tick that box if it's an option. But in this car, I hardly know it's there, and I think that's a good thing. The limited slip diff that's also standard on the Carrera T, well, that's got to be a good thing. Although I don't really miss it in the base Carrera, and as I put my foot down in second gear through there, although it starts to rotate a little bit, this thing has so much mechanical grip. We have 305 section rear tyres and less than 400 horsepower. Once again, I've said this car is definitely fast enough in a straight line, but it's not powerful enough to need 305 section rears. I wish that Porsche had stuck 285 section rears on it, so that in greasy conditions like this, the car would be a little bit more agile. Sure, it's planted and faster than ever with this amount of grip, but sometimes I just wish that this would come unstuck in first and second gear corners. It just doesn't seem to. You've got that engine over the back and just so much grip there. It's unbelievable. Talking of tyres, this particular press car has Pirelli P0s. And I have to say, in terms of outright feel, they're really good. Turn in, lovely. You get loads of feedback through this lovely Porsche wheel with a nice thin rim. But I would love to try one on the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyre, the N-Mark version designed for the 992 generation 911, because I know from trying a base Carrera back-to-back that the 4S not only gives you less cabin noise and tyre roar, but it also gives you a slightly better ride quality. And I know that that tyre would make this car even better, especially here in the UK. What's my conclusion? Well, it's probably no surprise that I think this is absolutely bloody brilliant. In fact, I think it's the best sports car I've ever driven, especially one that's designed and set up to be a road car. It's better than the outgoing 992.1 Carrera T, and that's saying something, although it does have this crappy starter button and lacks the analog dial in front of me, but everywhere else it's a little bit better. And I love that Porsche continue to do that, especially with their 911 products. In my opinion, they just seem to get better and better. And I think a car that's built, designed and sold in basically 2026, well, it's incredible to see that we still have things like this 6-speed manual gearbox, and we still have something that is just so fun and engaging to drive. Puts a big smile on my face. I really, really don't want to give this thing back. Okay, I'm not a fan of the color at all. I said in the intro, not sure if I love it or hate it, and I have to say, it's more towards the hate. If I was getting one, it would be in GT Silver or Ice Grey, and although I absolutely love these £5,000 carbon bucket seats, I would actually revert back to the standard sports seats, and I would tick the rear bench option, which is a free, no-cost option. You can only get that if you have the standard seats, because these don't fold forward, meaning I could have small passengers or a Peggy back there and just enjoy this car for what it is. You don't need to go crazy with the options sheet. And I've always said that once again about base Carreras. Just enjoy the package as it is. Sure, maybe tick the Bose sound system option like this particular press car has, although I haven't turned that on once because I've been enjoying the Flat 6 soundtrack that this still has. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I once again commend Porsche for building such a brilliant sports car in this day and age. I'll be getting my hands on a Carrera S in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that video hitting the channel anytime between now and Christmas. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up, leave any comments and questions below. Also, consider subscribing. Something like 75% of my viewership aren't subscribed. Until the next one, take it easy, and I'll see you then. Cheers. To give you an idea of how much traction this car's got, I'm going to do a launch. It's damp outside, there's puddles over there. Traction and stability switched off. Here we go. Unbelievable. Not a hint of slip in these conditions.